The House DFL elected Erin Murphy as its leader. She's here now to talk a little bit about her new role and the message of her caucus. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Julie.
I want to begin with, in your opinion, why do you think voters returned control of the Minnesota Legislature to the DFL?
I think that the voters were really frustrated as we left the last legislative session. And in fact, when our candidates and our members started knocking in June, it was hard to have a conversation with the voters in many parts of the state, because really they wanted to talk about how frustrated they were over the gridlock and the shutdown that had happened, and about how frustrated they were with what was happening in the Congress. So I think that Minnesotans, they're very practical people. They want a legislature that is actually going to get something done for Minnesota, and they're pretty clear about what they want. They're interested in an honestly balanced budget that's sustainable going forward. I think they're tired of the swings from deficit to surplus and deficit back, and having to balance the budget over and over again with gimmicks. And they were clear about that part. So I think it's in part because of the message that we had. I think it's in part because of their frustration. And then the last thing I'll tell you is that we worked really hard to recruit great candidates who are really rooted in their districts. And I think it's important for Minnesotans to recognize in the people seeking office someone that they know, someone that they can trust, someone that represents the values that they have. And we looked really hard to find candidates that were able to do that, and I think they chose them for that reason.
Governor Mark Daytons has essentially urged voters to try to help, or try to give the DFL a chance to lead. So now, do you feel any pressure at all to kind of rubber stamp any proposals of his?
I feel a lot of pressure to make sure that we do what we told Minnesotans we were going to do, which was to focus on the priorities of the state of Minnesota. And I think Governor Dayton shares those priorities as well. But I think if we remain focused and with conviction on making sure that we are honestly balancing the budget, making sure that we have great schools, and looking at jobs for the future and an economy for the future, if we do those things, I think Minnesotans will say, good job.
And the priorities, of course, are growing jobs and the economy. Do you think you can balance the budget without incorporating some new revenue? Is that even an option for this caucus?
I really think that it's important for us to look at every problem and all the solutions afforded to us. And one of my frustrations in the last number of years in the legislature is one solution has always been off the table, right? So we've looked at, instead of all of the opportunities, including what opportunities do we have in terms of revenue, we have looked at things like making deep cuts that have hurt middle-class families, and we've looked at budget gimmicks. And I think we should just consider all the options. It is clear to me that we need to reform our tax code to meet the needs of a 21st century economy. Our tax code reflects, the last century and not the future century. So I think we have a reform agenda around the tax code. I think we have to balance the budget, and I think that we should look at all the options and not take any of them off the table at this point.
And in the Senate, Majority Leader-elect, Designate, Tom Buck also talked a little bit about tax reform. If you were to craft a tax reform package, how would you like to see it set up?
Well, I want to make sure the tax code is fair, so that Minnesotans are participating in it fairly and everybody's paying their fair share. I also want to make sure that it reflects the economy of our future, right? So that we're not adding a tax burden to things that will stymie growth in our economy. So I think we have to be really smart about it. The good news is that there have been many commissions and task forces that have looked at this question, and there's plenty of data and reports to guide us. And the legislature will decide together, right, what is the right package. But I think if we focus on fairness and we focus on our future to make sure that we are building a state where everyone can thrive and everybody has an opportunity at the good life in Minnesota, we'll do just fine.
Governor Dayton also continues to call for a tax increase on higher income Minnesotans. Do you think your caucus would support this?
I think that's a discussion for our caucus. I worked really hard to recruit candidates based on their authenticity and the way they fit into their communities, and we didn't ask them questions about that. And certainly we have candidates across the state, now members-elect, and they have a perspective on that, and that's something that we're going to sort through together.
And I'd like to get your perspective on the fact that we have DFL-led legislature along with a Democrat DFL governor. Is this full steam ahead for you and your caucus, or do you plan to kind of take a step back and evaluate, engage, and proceed with caution? Which style reflects the House DFL?
Well, I think that for me, as a newly elected leader, it's really important to listen. It has been one of the most important skills for me, first as a registered nurse. It's an important skill for me as a parent. It's been an important skill for me as an elected official. And certainly now, with my intention to do a good job in representing the interests of our caucus and Minnesotans, I need to listen. But that doesn't mean we're not full steam ahead, because there's a lot of work to do on behalf of Minnesota. We have a lot of work to do to get ready for the upcoming legislative session and organizing the House of Representatives. So I think both things are true, but I will not forget that I asked for this job. I sought this job because I believe Minnesotans were clear in their perspective, and I think our caucus is prepared to lead on behalf of Minnesota.
And the GOP has, excuse me, the GOP has stated that it will reach across party lines and offer suggestions and their ideas on maybe how to fix the budget, the projected budget deficit. What the number is, obviously, we don't know at this point. But will you listen to their suggestions and maybe take some of those into account, or does your caucus have a pretty specific idea of what needs to be done?
I think we will listen. I've already talked with the new minority leader, Kurt Dowd. We'd had a relationship that we'd already, built. We've started working together on a number of issues in Health and Human Services before either of us were elected to these positions. Good ideas come from everywhere, and what I really hope that our caucus does, and that their caucus does, is step away from the ideology that we've seen drive Minnesota politics in the last couple of years, and really come with our sleeves rolled up, if you will, and ready to bring ideas to the legislature that will actually move Minnesota forward. We need less talking points and more good ideas, and wherever the good ideas come from, I'm willing to listen.
So what are your expectations for the upcoming session?
I think that we have a really, really difficult job to do in 2 years, right? We have to get the budget in shape. We have to figure out how to make sure our schools are excellent across the state, and we have to think about the economy and growing the middle class. And we have to do that knowing that we have a 2-year window that Minnesotans gave us to do that. We have to show them that we can lead and govern with integrity, and we can actually make progress. So we have a really big job to do, and I have complete faith, one, in our ability as a caucus to do that and do that well. I also have a lot of faith in Minnesotans that they will guide us if we listen carefully, and that at the end of this, at the end of these 2 years, Minnesotans will be in a better place and the state will be in a better place.
Okay, House Majority Leader Designate Erin Murphy, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.